Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity.
Please welcome Bianca.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for being here this morning. I just saw the end of that previous presentation and was slightly moved. I lost my dad in November to Parkinson's and Lewy body's dementia. So when I just heard the end of their story, I was like, oh, that's not really what I need to hear right now before I'm about to go and talk, because we try to put things out of our mind. But anyway. I'm here this morning to speak to you about donor engagement, which is a really important subject for not-for-profits if you're engaging with fundraising. As you're probably aware, we're a little behind on timings as well. So I had 45 minutes. I think I now have about 30. So we'll move through things quickly, but I'll be around over lunch if anyone wants to talk to me, or you can always catch me later as well. So today's outcomes are up on the screen there for you to see. We're looking at some key concepts and theories around donor development, some important things for you to remember in terms of stewarding your donors. We're going to talk a little bit about the donor promise and also how to develop your own donor recognition matrix. Yes, I believe they're being sent out, and all the sessions are being recorded as well. Yeah. So a couple of the key concepts that I just wanted to touch on firstly is the first one, there's 5 of them that are relevant for this session. So the first one is around donor relations. So this is, when we talk about donor relations, that's the comprehensive program that you use to engage with your donors, and all the work that you do would fall under that topic. Then there's donor acquisition, which is the process of identifying and acquiring your new donors. Then donor cultivation, so that's the process that you use to connect with your donors before they're making a gift. So it's when you're really talking with your prospects. That is not too dissimilar to the term donor stewardship or the activities. So donor stewardship is around engaging and connecting with your supporters after they've given a gift, and hopefully before they give again. And then donor retention is obviously around how you can retain your donors. And to be honest, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have as organisations after our acquisition. So once we've got our donors, how well are we retaining them? As this slide shows, the retention rates around the world are continuing to fall. According to some research in 2018, the average donor retention rates for first-year offline donors was 29%, and for first-year online-only donors was 22%. So what that actually means is over 70% of donors that make a gift to your organisation will never give to you again. So we're spending a lot of time doing acquisition and, working really hard, spending money trying to get these supporters to make a donation. And then if we're not doing the right things, they won't come back and make another donation. So we really need to up our ante on how we engage with them in that way. So some key donor stewardship theories. This is quite theoretical fundraising stuff, so I try not to bore you with it too long, but I think these 2 theories are important to understand. So the first one is the donor pyramid. This is basically a method that we talk about, a model, that we use to talk about the types of support that we have and the way people support us. So at the bottom of a donor pyramid, you would have your first-time donors and prospects, and obviously because they're at the base of the pyramid, that's the largest section, so you have the largest number of those. Towards the top of the pyramid, you're having your major donors and people leaving you a bequest, hopefully, and they're obviously in much smaller numbers. What we can sometimes tend to do, though, is spend so much time in the bottom of the pyramid trying to get those first-time gifts that we forget about doing that other stuff. So that's just a reminder to make sure you're balancing some of your time there. And the donor development cycle is another model that we use. This is a really simplified cycle, which just has 5 key steps. But as you can see, it talks about identifying, so you identify who your prospects might be, you cultivate your prospects, which is engaging with them, connecting with them, warming them up sort of for a gift, like you would cultivate the garden before when you plant the seed. Then you solicit, then you make sure you thank, which many would say is, aside from asking, that's the most important step in the cycle. And then you steward them appropriately, so hopefully you can get a repeat gift. So building long-term donor relationships, really, the way I think about it, this is not rocket science. If you just think back to your own relationships in your life, a lot can be learned from there. So what do you need to feel comfortable in a relationship and connected? What do others need to feel valued? And often it's just the little things in life that make us feel those things with people. So we need to sort of take a little bit of that mentality into our fundraising work when we're thinking about donor engagement. So the rest of this presentation is modelled on the idea of we're dating our donors. So let's think about how you're trying to get to know someone in a relationship and all of the things that go around those key points. So to do that, I've used some funny, interesting graphics for you all. So each of my points is got a little diagram or image of a well-known couple. So hopefully you know all of the couples, and hopefully they all tell good stories. As after I thought about this, I'm like, these are not all happy love stories. But anyway, they were great relationships when they were great. So that's the important thing. So the first one is that first impressions really do count. So you need to make sure your donor's first giving experience is a good one. So for some organisation, they involve a welcome pack, but you also got to make sure you're processing your donations quickly. Within 24 to 48 hours, ideally, people are getting receipts. Obviously, if they're online, they're getting an automatic receipt quickly, but if you're doing some follow-up emails and things like that, they need to be going out relatively quickly. Some organisations, and it is worthwhile, if you have a good email program or a system, you can actually set up what we call an onboarding pack or an onboarding system where you might have 3 sort of emails go out systematically over the first couple of weeks since you get their first donation. So that first one might be the thank you, the second one might be a bit more information about another program and introducing them to your organisation, and the third one might be telling them about your regular giving program or something else in your organisation, or even just something as simple as, did you know that we're on Facebook and Twitter, you can find us here. So those sorts of things just to keep in touch with people. The second point around making your donor feel loved is ensure that they feel comfortable. So that's a really important part for our organisations to remember. People need to have a sense of safety. They're not going to donate to you or support you if they can't trust you and they don't feel safe that you're going to do the right thing by them in terms of their donation. We need to make sure we do that by respecting their privacy, so having your privacy policies available on your website and making sure you abide by those things. And another thing a lot of organisations do is what we call a donor promise. So I'm not sure if does anyone's organisation have a donor promise? No. So a donor promise is basically a promise that we make to our donors publicly to let them know these are all the things that we commit to. So if you give us your money, these are all the things we promise we will do. And so, there we go. I was getting ahead of myself. So it articulates the commitment that your charity will give to the people that are making donations to you. So I have a couple of examples, and these have just come from the websites because, like I say, these are charities that, the point of a donor promise is to make it very public and to share it with your donors. So these are all on these websites, and these are just some that I know about that I think are quite good. So again, if you're starting to think about this is what you want to do, you don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. Go out there, see what other organisations are doing and, mould it into your own sort of variants of that. So this is the Alana and Madeline Foundation. That's their You may not be able to read that. I understand it's very small, but I was just trying to capture sort of what it looks like. So the headline for theirs is they promise to treat their donors with respect, honesty and openness, and then they have a number of points about how they do that. This is Mary Potter Hospice. They have it's quite a simple one, but it still gets to the point of what they're doing, and it still offers the same sort of thing. The third point is get to know your donors. So obviously in that dating situation, you need to get to know someone. So firstly, you need to find out who they are. So we can do this by doing donor surveys or by asking questions, getting feedback. Make that conversation an interactive one, not just you telling people stuff all the time. And where possible, pick up the phone. So I know we're all stretched for time, but as we'll see later in our donor matrix that donor recognition matrix that I'll give you a sample of, for certain levels of donations, you can actually invest a little bit more time. So you might be able to pick up the phone and give someone a call just to say thank you and have a bit of a chat. But if you've got a good support network of volunteers that can come in, sometimes getting those people to make some phone calls as well is really good. And those phone calls, the point of it is just to get some information. So ask them, what made you first donate to our organisation? If you imagine if you donated like $20 to an organisation for the first time and you got a call from someone within the next week or two to say, thanks so much, we're just really curious about what made you choose to support our donation. That would make you feel really valued, and the chance that you'll give again is more likely. Oops, sorry, I skipped over. There's a little quote that I've added down the bottom there from a gentleman called John Hayden, who is a well-renowned donor engagement expert who actually passed away last month, I think it was. But he recently wrote a book called Donor Care, which I think is really published next week, but I've read some excerpts from it, and this was one of the quotes that he had from it. And it says, the real power of appreciating donors is recognising that they have a story and that they are telling that story through their gift to you. And I thought about that at first. I was like, what's that talking about? What does he mean? And then I thought about myself and my own journey and, and some of the organisations that I support. And one of them is a small organisation called Shake It Up Foundation, which is all about Parkinson's research. And I absolutely know why I support that organisation. And we did memorial, donations at my dad's service, and I gave a certain amount and I wrote a certain message, and that was part of my story, and that's why I did it. And the organisation actually responded really well to how we did that, which was really lovely. The next point is around staying connected. So being connected with someone is really important, and it can be really, really hard when we have a lot of supporters and a lot of donors. It's hard to have one-on-one relationships, but it's really important if you have systems in place that you can manage your communication so people feel like you have a one-on-one relationship with them, even though you may not exactly do that. So regular contact and updates is very important. Here's some data that I've recently found that talks about staying connected. So what you need to think about is, what do your donors actually want to hear from you? And what do they want to hear about? Donor expectations regarding transparency and accountability is at a very high point. Recent giving and fundraising that's been done over the last few months through the bushfires has probably brought that to a head again. People really want to know about have really high expectations, as they should. And, most organisations, I would say the majority of organisations, are doing the right thing. It's just we need to be better at talking about that. So this table here, which I can't really see myself, so good luck if you guys can see that there, but it is a little, this is from the Australian Community Trends Report a couple of years ago, and basically this is a question that they asked in that was, how important is it to you that a charitable organisation provides you with the following information? So, interestingly, the information about your donations tax deductible is the one down the bottom, but that's the message that we're so good at telling people. Oh, it's June 30th coming up, give us your tax deductible donation, when interestingly that's the one they worry less about in terms of messaging. Some of the top ones though are transparent reporting of your administration costs, and again I would personally say on that, don't shy away from that. Talk openly and honestly about what administration costs mean to your organisation, what enables you to do. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can't go down discussing now. The top couple are around administration type costs. Then there's a breakdown of where your donations are going. And then also up top there, or in the middle there, but still quite high, 69-65%, is an overview of the impacts that your charities had by actually reporting back to them about what you're doing, which I think is really important. Sorry if I'm going really fast. I'm just conscious of the time. So if you want to ask any questions, just yell out. This is another quote, and that's the book that I just was talking about from John Hayden that is, I think, due to be published or released next week. He talks about connection is about sharing. And this is another quote that I read and I sort of had to sit with it for a minute thinking about it. He says, connection is about sharing, like sharing chocolate or a movie. Connection allows you and the other person to share something that you both have in common. And connection means that you belong. And I think it's that last part, not that I'm suggesting you'll send chocolate to your donors, but that last part there, that's why it's important. Because if people feel like they belong, then they're more likely to continue to support you. Yeah.
I'm really struggling to get people to answer the phone.
When you're making calls to them. Yeah. Sometimes that can be hard.
Always.
It's very tricky. If you're calling from a blocked number, people won't answer. And sometimes people, if they don't know the number, sometimes people don't call or don't answer.
And it's hard to get them to call you back.
Yeah, so what I would sometimes say, if you're making a call to say thank you or something like that, I would leave a message, if they do have a voicemail system, which most people do nowadays, leave a message saying who you are and the reason for your call, and say, if you'd like to call me back, this is number, but actually tell them, because the real reason you're calling, if that's what it is to say thank you. So I'd give them all that message. So they're still getting that. They're not thinking, oh, it's a charity calling me. They want me to call them back. They must want money. I'm not going to call them back. Or, you know what I mean? So when I make those calls, I will leave that important part in the message. Yeah. But it can be a bit tricky sometimes though.
Thank you.
So in terms of staying connected, some other things in terms of regular contact and updates, obviously sending out newsletters or EDMs to people. Social media is a great way to keep people updated. You can host stewardship functions from time to time, and they don't have to be big fancy things. It can be a simple morning tea or afternoon tea, wine and cheese or whatever. It can be very simple. Do think about your audience though. If you've got a lot of older people, maybe having an evening function is probably not going to work, because maybe some older people don't like to come out, especially in the winter. They don't like to come out too much, but maybe a morning tea would be great for them to come along to. So just have a think about that and be available. So that's why I said in your phone message, still leave the message, tell them what you're doing and give them a number to call you back. And even in your emails, give them the email or a phone number to always get in touch with you so that they can. I find nothing more infuriating when I'm trying to get in touch with a person and I just get an info email address or, and it's not really going to the person. I understand in certain circumstances it's necessary, but you don't want your donors to feel like they can't reach you or someone in your organisation if it's not you specifically. So the next point is around being honest and trustworthy. Now, again, this one probably goes without saying, and it's not that we're necessarily being we're lying or being untrusting with our supporters, but by not being transparent and by not showing that accountability, we can sometimes come across that way. So it's really important to be mindful of that. I also have on here, be honest and trustworthy in a personal sense. And what I mean by that is if you're in a situation, like even I used to work for a rescue helicopter service, and we would do tours, and the public would come in and have a tour and stuff. And sometimes you'd have someone in the group, nearly all the time, that was a real aviation enthusiast, and they'd always ask me a question about the helicopter. I'd never heard the question before, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So what I always was comfortable to do was just to say, I don't know the answer to your question. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to find out. And if I couldn't get the pilot or a crewman, handy because they might have been out, I will always say to them, I'll look into that for you. Let me take your details. I'd take their email on the spot or something, and I would actually go and get the answer for them and follow that up. Because at that point, they're seeing that I'm being honest. I'm not just making up an answer or fluffing my way across that. I'm being open, transparent, and I'm being a little bit vulnerable by saying I don't know the answer, but I'm also following up and getting back to them. So that builds some trust and credibility. So that's what you can do on a personal level, and then obviously at an organisational level in terms of how you communicate with people. The next point is ways to make your donor feel loved is make sure you're all about them. So we call that in fundraising being donor-centric. So your communications and the way you think about delivering your fundraising programs always has your donor top of mind, which is sometimes much easier said than done, because most of the time what we want to do is we think what we would like. And most of the time we're not the donors. Even if we do donate, we're not the typical donor. So ideally you have an idea of who your typical donor is. And if your typical donor is like a 65-year-old to 75-year-old woman, and I'm, a 40-year-old woman, then I'm not the right person. But if I am the typical donor, then you can have those opinions. But it's important to think about our donors in that way. So the other part of it is often we think about our organisations in terms of our beneficiaries or the work that we're doing or our mission, which is really important, because for most of us, that's where our passion comes from. We do what we do because we love, the end result and helping how we can help. But none of this would be possible without our donors. And you need to make sure your donors know that you know that, and make sure they feel that as well. So where I have their language is important. What I mean about that is if you've got communications to them, just go through. An easy task to do is just pick up your last newsletter or your last e-appeal that you wrote or communication that you sent out to your donors, and read it and mark down how many times you use the word we or our or us, and how many times you talked you, your, and that, and see. And ideally you're talking about the donor more than you're talking about the organisation. That's a really important thing that's a really quick tip to make sure you just turn your communications around slightly. The next one is to make them feel special is really important, obviously. So a couple of tips on how you make people or your donors feel special is by involving them. So get them involved, offer opportunities for volunteering perhaps, offer opportunities to come along to stewardship events, offer opportunities if you have a survey to do, or if you want someone to, some organisations, I know it can be hard, but if you've got a new big campaign that you're thinking of doing, you might want to get a couple of your closer donors in to get their feedback on some things, like a little focus group or something. Think about different ways you can involve your organisation, your donors in your organisation. Because if someone's involved, then it's more than just the money that's in their pockets. Then they get to feel connected to your organisation. Seek opinions. That's what we said around doing surveys and things like that. And I know this last point here is probably really tricky sometimes, but get your board involved in this. That cry over there. Get your board involved as much as possible in your work. And I understand for most organisations or for most people, this is the frustrating part of what they do. But if you talk to your board about fundraising, they'll be like, because everyone freaks out and thinks it means they have to go and beg for money on the corner, because apparently that's what we do all day. But if you talk to them about thanking donors, get them to make some of those phone calls. One of my favourite things to do in fundraising is make a phone call to someone and all you actually want to say is thank you. So if you can get your board members to do those little sorts of things, that's actually them helping out in fundraising. They don't have to ask. That's not scary. Saying thank you to someone's very easy to do. Most of them are happy to do that and get involved. And it actually, the flip side of it is actually really makes people feel valuable. And what's funny is I became a board member for a small charity about 4 years ago. And so over the 15 years I've been in fundraising, I've made plenty of thank you calls as a fundraising manager or, whatever role I've been in. I've done the same thing as a director of an organisation, and the response that I get is very, very different. People are way more impressed when I say I'm Bianca calling on behalf of Indigo Foundation. I'm one of the board, I'm one of the directors, as I'm Bianca the fundraising manager. I mean, they still like Bianca the fundraising manager, but Bianca the director has way more clout. So that's why you should get a couple of your board members doing those sorts of things. And they only have to make 1 or 2 phone calls a month. Even just start small. Don't give them a list of 100 to call. And creating a giving club. Most organisations are doing these sorts of things, but especially with major donors or people giving larger donations or even regular giving, make people part of a club because it gives them that sense of feeling special. It's probably my favourite couple up on screen right now, just quietly. A huge Simpsons fan. Don't let that sway you, though, that now you might have lost some respect for me, but they're very clever. Anyway, so the next point I have is let them know that they make a difference. So this comes back a little bit to staying connected and giving them their updates, but actually make sure they know after they've given you $20 or $50 or $500 that made a difference. So that means telling them a story a little ways down the track. So you've got to report back where you can use your program staff. So if, and I know you're probably all not huge organisations, so your program staff may just be the person that, sits on the soup van every Thursday night, or it could be a volunteer that is delivering the program. But get someone that can help tell the story who's close to the impact. And it might be a little video. Video is a really great way to do that. It doesn't have to be a fancy one, just on an iPhone or something. It could be getting postcards made. That's a really easy thing, like a photo printed onto card and a little message written on the back. You can get them printed on there. They're not expensive. Those are the sorts of really simple gestures that you can do to help your supporters let them understand that the money that they gave you a couple of months ago is actually making a difference. Obviously, say thank you as part of that. And the next one is around inspiring your donors. Now, ideally, you would assume if they've given to you once and they've become your donor, that you have inspired them because they've done that. But you want to make sure that you continue to do that in the stewardship phase so that they get that second gift. So you don't become, so they don't become one of the 70% of donors that don't support you again. You want to turn that around for your organisation. So the way that we inspire people is we tell stories. So make sure you get some good stories from the ground and from the work of what you do. And we all have them. We wouldn't be doing the work that we do if there were no good stories coming out of what we do. So it's just about how can we articulate that. So distill it down. Again, it could just be easy talking through a video, a couple of minutes, write down some dot points. It could just be about a small win, a really small win. It doesn't have to be a huge, return on investment. This is my theory of change, social impact story. Just tell little stories. That's important. And use emotive language as well. There's a whole bunch of, you just have to Google emotive language list and you can get a list that's easy. And when I used to write a lot, I used to have it printed and stuck near my desk. So there's certain words that you can use, and it's around persuasive writing techniques is what it is. So you're just using subtle words here and there that are helping get the emotion expressed across to your supporters. Okay, so they were all my tips for good donor engagement and dating your donors. So hopefully that is helpful, and I know I've gone through that very fast. So happy to chat with anyone if you've got questions afterwards. In terms of donor recognition though, donor recognition is part of donor stewardship and part of how we engage people to make sure we keep them around for the next gift. So donor recognition is really about good relationship management. It's about acknowledgement. It's about the spirit of gratitude, which is really important to have in the work that we do. We need to be grateful for so many things. We need to be grateful for our volunteers and for our donors, and probably for even, though it may not seem it some days, but for having the opportunity to do the work that we do. But donor recognition is something that should be done year round. So it's not just about doing something it's not just about saying thank you when you get the gift and sending out an email receipt, although that is super important. There are other things that you can do. And every organisation can do some really simple, basic things. But then depending on your organisation, there'll be other things that only you can do, and you should harness those sorts of ideas. So I've got a sample. This is a super basic one just for the purpose of this exercise, but this is a simple donor recognition matrix that I'll share with you. So as you can see, across the top, I might just stand here for a second. Across the top, I've just got different gift amounts. So this is based on your donor's gift amount. So you can make those be whatever you want them to be. If you don't have gifts over $1,000, make this first one maybe up to $50 or something. You can break that down however you like. Then down the side here, we have the different ways that we can acknowledge our supporters. So obviously it's receipt is the first thing, a thank you letter, e-news that they get sent maybe quarterly or whatever. If they're going to get a phone call like we talked about before. You might have merchandise packs that you can give out. You might offer a CEO lunch. But obviously our CEO lunch is not going to be for everybody that gives a gift. You can see over here, that's just one for the people that give $1,000 or more. So in your organisation it might only be 10 people. And you might only have a CEO lunch once a year. You might do a July or August sort of end of financial year thing or a New Year thing, whatever. But this is just an introduction to, you should have, if you use this model, you could actually build on it here and have lots of other things. And so these things here is probably what all of you can do. What the other things that you need to think about is what's unique to your organisation and what will really connect with people. For instance, when I worked with a youth charity, we had an art therapy program, and so we actually got some of the kids one time as part of the art therapy to make we bought all these little canvases, and they decorated all the little canvases with what thank you meant to them, or how to be grateful. I think the lesson was actually about. So it was a therapeutic lesson for them around gratitude. And then we used those little canvases, the mini canvases they'll stand on like a little easel. We used them to give to our higher value donors over the next 6 to 12 months. That was a really personalised thing. And they had all this little story on the back of how it came from the kids' art therapy class. So that's something that we could do, but not every organisation could do that. Another one we had was in the same organisation, we had the kids used to do drumming workshops as part of therapy too, and so we offered people that would come in and do a drumming workshop, not with the young people, because obviously you've got to watch the vulnerable young children and things, but we had our donors come together and do, for our higher value donors come and do an African drumming workshop one evening, which went really well. So think about some of the things that you offer at your organisation and how you can bring those together. Okay, I have 1 minute to go, and I think I'm going to make it. So this is just the last little nice quote that I think I can leave there with you. And time for questions, but I might just hang back here because I know Elliot Costello is probably going to start speaking soon, and I wouldn't want anyone to miss that. I do just want to quickly say that the Small Nonprofits Alliance is an online membership program that supports small charities, so charities up to $1 or $2 million generally. Most charities would find it helpful, but that's our target. And we've got a special for anyone that's here today. If you join our membership program by tomorrow at 5 o'clock, which is free to join a basic membership, we're going to choose someone tomorrow evening who's joined over the past 24 hours and upgrade you to an advanced membership, which is valued at $200. Like I said, thank you very much. There's my little contact details if you need them. And sorry that was a little bit rushed. I'll put that one back if you need that one. But I'm here if anyone wants to talk. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Bianca.